Leftists have a fertility problem. Since they tend to hate all humans, but themselves, of course, they tend to not bring that many of them into the world and therefore have less opportunities than their more procreation-friendly political competitors to influence humans at a young age. Not to worry, their plan is to confiscate our money. Isn't that always the plan? And in this case, use it to misinform, cajole, and if necessary, bully our children into the cram down that has become modern leftist doctrine. This may come as a shock to you, but I'm not a big fan of the teachers' unions, or today's academia at large, actually. Now, in a truly free market, unions can be used in organizing workers who feel they're not getting a fair shake from management. The system we have today, where unions enjoy legal protections and coercive powers over employees that other employees don't have, is foolish and counterproductive. But in theory, without those elements, unions could be useful even in the public sector. In practice, unfortunately, the public teachers' unions have become an extremely destructive force in the lives of our children. This has happened largely because they are completely unaccountable to many of the parents who are paying their salaries. Since teachers' unions are dominated by leftists, they're using their protected position as career bureaucrats to force their political opinions on our children. The pervasive political insanity took a breather in the recent Virginia gubernatorial election, where a candidate openly opposed to parental involvement in education was defeated by one who favored it. The idea that this should be the exception rather than the rule gives you a window into the insane state of our politics today. The Virginia election, and many others across the country, was heavily influenced by whether or not critical race theory should be taught in our schools. What exactly is critical race theory? Well, whatever obfuscating definition its proponents may choose to use, there's one thing about CRT that is indisputable no matter which definition you choose. It increases emphasis on race in our schools. Up until just recently, it was taken as a given that we were working toward a society that decreased emphasis on race and not increased it, for heaven's sake. The idea that racism is a substantial force in limiting opportunities here in the U.S. is laughable. How do I know? Well, statistics. And the fact that much of the rest of the world is laughing at our obsession with this topic, when we clearly live in one of the least racist countries in the world. Now, let's set aside the dueling definitions and get right to the point. Any educational system that increases emphasis on race in our schools, no matter what the justification, is destructive to the well-being of our children and needs to be dismantled immediately. On the next subject, I love Ben Shapiro, love Jordan Peterson. I also love Blair White. I don't share Ben's or Jordan's passionate interest in pronouns except when they are government imposed. I prefer Blair's approach. Many conservatives don't agree with me, but I don't mind calling people whatever they want me to call them. That's one thing. In schools, I think it goes without saying, or should, that kids need to figure out gender stuff on their own with their family and shouldn't be ridiculed for whatever choices they make. To repeat, kids need to figure out gender stuff on their own and with their family. In many cases, that is not what's happening today. The teachers' unions and administrators are actively pushing kids toward gender confusion at exactly the age when they're working through this kind of thing. I'm not sure how else to put this. Who the hell do these people think they are? It takes entitlement thinking to a whole new level to believe that someone whose job it is to teach our kids to read and write, and by the way, failing miserably at that, is somehow the best choice to guide them through very often extremely complex and personal emotional issues. It just blows my mind sometimes. Now, finally, public schools have been throwing environmentalist propaganda at our kids for years. Obviously, the excuse du jour is the existential threat posed by climate change. You have to wonder if they even know what that phrase means. Anyway, I just want to address this one with a brief personal anecdote. Not long ago, his siblings ratted out my 10-year-old son telling us he had almost missed the bus coming home from school. He didn't give us a reason. He just said he'd try not to do it again. That evening, we received an email from his teacher saying that the reason that he had almost missed the bus was that he was in a heated debate with her over climate change. She explained to us that he was misinformed about the existential threat facing us due to climate change. Naturally, we replied with an email saying that, in essence, we backed up his statements and that if she'd like, we'd be happy to facilitate a more detailed discussion regarding the facts on climate change. Of course, she never replied. And we pretty much forgot about it until the end of the semester, when this teacher gave my son the worst grades he has ever gotten in school. When we pointed out the fact that his test scores in her own class conflicted with the grades she had given him, she said something to the effect that, well, that may be true, but he could have done better. Big mistake. When we presented these facts to the principal of the school, a rare source of sanity in our school district, this teacher came to rue the day she had taken this retaliatory action. Now, I have many parenting failures that I'd rather not have subjected to public scrutiny, but this was not one of them. As a statistical fact, about 75% of children follow the politics of their parents. Let's try to get that up to 85%, or maybe even 90%. Most kids will listen a lot more closely than you might think to a reasonable argument, except if you have the temerity to criticize Mr. Beast, or worse yet, Dude Perfect. You try to do that and you're dead meat.